Okay, let's do this. I'm going to try this. Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to my channel. I'm going to call this 10 minutes of imaginal space. What's imaginal space? Imaginal space is a way of using language in which um, a person plays with sharing an experience solely for the purpose of offering it to someone else that they can have their experience. Um, and I do that in trusting that whatever rises in another person is the thing that the universe wanted them to come to. And the way that I was raised, that sounds like a lot of kumbaya nonsense, but uh, it does seem to be the nature of how language has evolved for me. Um, and so part of this video is trying to be of service to other people on the other side of what I've recovered from. And another part is finding my voice for what I've recovered from. Some background on me, I'm an autistic writer who lives in upstate New York. But autism is only one part of my neurodivergence. And by neurodivergence, I mean that the way that I relate to myself radically diverges from the way I relate to other people. So when I use the word neurodivergence, that's what I mean. For me, neurodiversity is the observation that human beings, from my perspective, are increasingly developing this internal difference. So the way of keeping up with the narratives of the world is very different from the way a person relates to themselves. That's my understanding of it. It's heightened, I think, and more easily recognizable than people who have, relative to the narrative, glaring forms of neurodiversity like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, bipolar, borderline, any of these other things that I don't know beyond autism, some forms of trauma. But from what I've been learning since brain rehab and getting off the streets and getting service connected with the VA and rebuilding my life after brain rehab, and learning that I have autism, uh, exploring my world has caused me to try to identify and understand this larger perspective of how consciousness can be. Once I learned that I had autism, and then I also learned that I have a brain injury, um, I had a lot to work out internally to find my own understanding of what my condition actually was. Before I had the different diagnoses, I had no idea why my life had changed and why things had become so difficult, why some things had become easier. Um, to wit, when I was 22 years old on my 22nd birthday, I was at a party, and in a suicide attempt, I jumped off of a landing of a fire escape stairwell, dropped about 12 feet, inverted spread eagle, and slammed on my forehead onto the concrete step. And I didn't pass out. I was dazed, and nobody was there to report the incident. It all happened so fast, nobody caught up. But my friends had called an ambulance immediately when they'd seen me freak out. I was on a lot of acid. In any case, by the time I came down, I'd been taken to the hospital because they knew I was messed up on the steps when the ambulance people came. When I came off the acid and was getting through the days, I was released and went to my friend's house. I laid down for a few hours to have some rest before each of us were going to go home from having gathered that weekend for the party. And when I woke up and came out in the living room a few hours later in the morning, my friends turned to talk to me, and I didn't know what they were doing with their mouths. I had lost not only language, I had lost my sense of what language and meaning was or ever had been. I couldn't understand the physical thing that they were doing. I couldn't understand the reason for the sounds they were making. I didn't know what was happening when the sound reached my ear. I didn't something in me told me that I should be able to make sense of it, and I couldn't. I didn't know why. I didn't know why. I didn't know why. Seemed familiar, but it was weird. And the one tool I needed to ask anyone else, language, was gone. And so words did come back over the course of about the next 2 weeks. And as they did, I remembered the names of books. I remembered table. I remembered things. But the way the words connected to create meaning was something that I couldn't quite trust, because I didn't understand if my way of understanding had not been the thing that had caused that hellscape I had fallen into, the loss of language. I didn't understand that I had lost language because, again, I needed language to understand that I'd lost language. For me, it was an experiential shift. Language was part of it, but not all of it. So anyway, I lived there for the rest of my life. And that became, when I tried to rebuild my sense of how to build language and express myself, to relate to the rest of the world and take my step back into my young life, the ways didn't make sense. When I tried to linearly and literally rebuild what people had taught me language was, in terms of social justice, grammar, formal logic, philosophy, psychology, religion, faith, anything that I learned about it, what people said the thing was didn't actually match with how reality seemed to work. I can go into that another time. But the point is, I arrived many, many years later when somebody finally, a neurologist, identified my brain injury. It had been nearly 31 years later. I had lived in a place where, outside of language, from my autistic perspective, which worked perfectly well, there were ways things connected that I could feel my way through and then build the words later. And that had been a way that had helped me learn higher mathematics, because the meanings of the mathematics would fit together in one way, in a way my body could feel, and then I would apply words later to express it mathematically. So I think I got kind of lost in this space trying to create a 10-minute video. Somehow I got led to telling my story. I don't know why that is. In any case, I went through brain rehab in 2015, and I was still out on the streets, and eventually I got off the streets, and I got help getting the correct diagnoses, and immediately found from the professionals who diagnosed me them saying that there's not even any science for how someone processes both autistically and aphasically and synesthetically. So my approaches to recovery, which involve trauma, 12-step recovery from addiction, alcoholism, gender identity, sexual expression, orientation, faith, philosophy, relationship, boundaries. None of these could be founded on a cognitive basis because there was no cognitive model from which to proceed. When I learned of my autism, that was part of the thing, but things known about autism are captured in language, even if it's not effective. There's no model that I've been able to find for how meaning works from an aphasic place. And since my mind works in both of these ways at once, I have found as a writer, which I don't know why I need to write, it's just horrible, but because that's a need that I have that's followed with me for my entire life, I've had to find a way to express myself that works with both sensibilities, the autism and the aphasia. And because of that, I have come to find that for whatever reasons, it seems to be the case that when I share my thoughts in my way, even though I stumble around and it's awkward, another person experiences meaning in a way they never have before. That creates an experience, which creates a kind of change, which some people seem to find helpful and pleasant. I don't know, I take their word for it. So I want to try to make little 10-minute videos because I know my consciousness is kind of compact and dense, and see if I can develop a practice of expressing myself in a way that's relatable. That's all for today. Thanks. Bye.